Hey guys, thanks so much for dropping by to the David Petula podcast. In today's episode, I have on a very special guest by the name of Meatman, and he has had the most interesting life. This talk ended up going so long that I had to actually split this into 3 episodes. For the next 3 weeks, we're going to have a whole month of meat. Take that however you want. In this first episode, we are going to be introducing Meatman, who he is, and a little bit about his life and the amazing people he's met. People like Lemmy from Motorhead and much, much more. He's got stories for literally decades, and he's a really interesting guy. He's a great storyteller, and I hope you enjoy these next 3 episodes. So, Marty, thanks for being here today.
Okay, I love it.
Yeah, me too. So, you are easily the best storyteller I know, and I have a feeling if we don't break this one into 2 episodes, I have a feeling you'll at least be on for a couple more just because you've got decades and decades of stories.
Thank you.
So, first, how did you get started in the music industry? How did your rock and roll photography thing get started?
Okay, well, you know, it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to tell it without going back to the beginning, really, of me as a person. So I'm just going to do a little quick thing.
Yeah.
I always tell people that I have a lot of things, or I at least have one thing in common with most people, and I was born. And that's usually about where it ends. I was a weird kid. I was always an outcast.
Not much has changed.
No, it hasn't. And that's, you know what, I was just thinking this the other day, that is so the truth, that I was sitting in my living room going, you know what? I'm still the outcast, and it's awesome. As much as I hated it when I was little and young that I didn't fit in with any of the groups, now it's become the most awesome thing that I'm so glad that that's the way that it was.
You stand out in a crowd.
But when you're young, you want to be part of the cool groups and the cool cliques, and you don't understand why. That was, for me, the hard part was I didn't understand why I didn't fit into those groups,
Okay.
What it was about me that made me so different than them. But so that obviously led me down a trail of just not really being able to figure anything out. So ended up being a high school dropout, didn't graduate from high school, ended up an alcoholic, druggie, and really kind of lost, just totally lost, and could have just totally went off the end. And that all ended with when I was 19, finding my 2 roommates dead in our garage of the apartment, or the house we rented, which that's a whole long story in itself. But basically, my two of my roommates that I lived with committed suicide one night, and believe it or not, that still didn't even turn me around. That just made it worse.
Really?
And for probably about 6 months after that, it went down to the point of I just ended up at the bottom of a whiskey barrel and didn't care about anything in life. That what was it worth? But I started to realize how important life could be, and for some reason that started to click, that if I didn't stop the way I was going, that wasn't the intention for me, and not the way that I needed to be. So I started to change quit drinking,
Nice.
Which was the first thing. And so that started to change my life around. And then lots of stuff happened, but I started to get my shit together.
So how old were you when you quit drinking?
I was 19.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Before it was, I suppose back then it was.
You could drink
legal.
when you're 18.
Yeah.
Which, and I always tell people, people who don't think people should drink till they're 21, that's ridiculous. I often think if I hadn't have been allowed to drink till I was 21, I may have not experienced what I did, and I may have, who knows? You never know with life. You just got to take what it gives. But
Yeah.
yeah, but I started drinking when I was probably 13 or something,
Okay. Yeah.
So it's not like it was a new thing to me. So I sobered up, got married, had a daughter, which wasn't really my intentions, and that didn't work out so well either. That wasn't the intention of my life. So, but music was always, that was the one thing that connected me to people that were like me. I discovered that it was music in my life. And I also discovered that I thought about music different than other people did. It seemed like it spoke to me differently than my friends. You know, we grew up with the Beatles and bubblegum rock and roll, and so many of my friends were listening to that kind of stuff, where I was starting to discover the Led Zeppelins and the Deep Purples, and just going like, wow, this is amazing stuff. And it was just that connection that started me down the path. You know, that it was really that connection that got me going, and then I just fell in love with going to live concerts. It was like, then once I discovered music people, I discovered the people that I needed to be around, that gave me inspiration, that understood me, I guess, is more what it was.
Okay, that was your crowd.
Yeah, they kind of understood how I was thinking, you know, and so much of the music spoke to me, and I was much more sober at this time, which helped out a lot.
Yeah.
So I just actually started it out as a hobby. You know, in the 70s, you didn't need photo passes to take pictures at concerts. It was kind of similar to what it is now. You know, I mean,
cell phones. People.
Yeah,
just,
you know, you didn't. You know, nobody stopped you from taking. No, it was hard to take pictures back then because the equipment, film, and all that stuff wasn't very good. So it didn't become a problem till those things got better. But as they got better, I was taking these pictures, and concerts were getting more expensive, and I was going to lots and lots and lots of shows, and I was missing lots of work, so then I wasn't making money either doing that.
So you couldn't buy the film.
Yeah, so I was like, well, I got to figure out a way to make this work for me, that it doesn't cost me so much, and I can go to all the concerts I want to. And right at that point in time was when things started to change, and all of a sudden, boom, no more cameras at shows. You had to get photo passes, and I was like, well, wow, how am I going to do this now? Because I had fallen in love with taking pictures of concerts.
Okay.
And I was taking a lot of pictures down at what they call Zivko's Rock and Roll Palace in Hartford, which anyone who's a little bit older, it was just the greatest venue north of Milwaukee that so many bands played at. And so I was taking pictures there as a hobby. The PhotoPass thing came in, so I went down there and talked to them about starting to take pictures for the club to put up on the walls and stuff like that, and talked my way into that job as doing that for their club, which then allowed me to get photo passes for the show, which is just basically how I got started.
So was that job paid?
It was paid through getting into all the shows I wanted to free, getting fed, getting so not cash.
Okay, did they take care of any of your film expenses or anything?
Yes, they did.
Okay,
yes,
nice.
They did, yeah. So when it came to that, and they also paid for like the photos to be blown up to put on their walls and stuff like that.
Okay, that's good.
But it wasn't like I was making any money.
Yeah, I was just making sure that you weren't spending even more money now that you're doing this.
Yeah, but it was saving me.
Yeah.
So much money, because I was going to so many concerts, and it was like, okay, this is a lot better. And I wanted to keep taking pictures at that point. It was just, I just fell into it, and it was fun. It was so much fun to do it, you know?
So when you started that, like before you had gotten the gig, had they seen any of your work?
Only because I brought it back to show them. Oh, okay. Because I had met the manager of the club and stuff while I was down there, and just talking to him about the pictures, and he said I'd like to see some, you know? So I brought him down, and then that's what started the whole thing rolling. Okay. And then I couldn't get my camera in anymore, so I went and talked to them and said, we should work out a deal here. Yeah. And they were like, hey, that sounds like a great idea. That's cool that they were receptive to that. Oh, yeah. It was... Yeah. And it also helped me start to understand how the business worked with getting photo passes, and that I learned real quick that if I was going to want to continue to take pictures, I was going to have to figure out how I could keep in the loop of being able to get passes for, shows and whatnot. Yeah. So at that point in time, before you had gotten the gig, do you remember the biggest band you had taken pictures of? Well, with the very first concert I ever took a camera to, I snuck a camera. It was 1981, Brown County Arena. Ozzy Osbourne and Def Leppard.
No shit.
Oh man! And I still have the pictures.
Really?
You know, they're not very good. They're not very good.
Okay.
I had a little Kodak Instamatic camera, and I fought my way up to the front. And you could get in big trouble in these days for doing that. You know. So.
Wow.
But I snuck my way up to the front, and I snapped a few pictures, and I have the pictures. So
That's amazing.
Yeah. So that was cool.
Did you show them those pictures too?
Well, you know, those. Not really, because they really are crappy pictures. You know, they're not very good at all. But they're still there. You know, I have pictures in those photographs. I have pictures of Randy Rhoads, which is pretty rare.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they're crappy pictures, but to me they mean a lot. Because they were the first ones. So the bands that I had just started shooting, I'm trying to think of who I shot before I needed photo passes. I think I shot a Motorhead show, which was one of the first shows at Zivko's Ballroom that I shot. And then it was
pretty big.
Yeah, but they weren't at the time, you know.
Oh, really? Okay.
This is the early '80s. They weren't, you know. What a show! It was. The opening act was a band out of Milwaukee called Blacklist. The second band was the Cro-Mags. And the headliner was Motorhead. And I think they had just released the Orgasmatron album.
Really?
And wow, what a show. We had so much fun.
Man. How do you remember like the band names from, that was like 40 years ago now.
Well, it just kind of became impregnated in your brain. And I forget a lot. I really do. It's, you know, it's surprising sometimes what I forget. But I still save a lot of stuff, you know.
Okay.
I have thousands of concert stub tickets and
amazing.
photo pass, you know, the passes and stuff.
You know, I've played with bands for over 10 years now, and I can barely remember the venues I've played at or the other bands I've played with, unless we become friends at the show, then add them on Facebook so don't forget. But man, that's really impressive. Like, you remember bands from 12 years before I was born playing with Motorhead.
But you know, wow, it was so different back then because you didn't have the internet, you know, and whatnot. I don't know. It was just way different.
Yeah.
You know, and it really is what it, you know, it really was such a passion for me. Once I discovered that I was pretty good at that, I was hooked.
Yeah.
And then I ended up, because I was working at Nina Foundry at this time. Okay. And it was one of the reasons I was missing so much work was because I worked second shift.
Oh, okay.
And any concerts during the week, the work suffered because I was going to the shows. Yeah. And but then, as I got better at it, and everybody started commenting on my photos, and the people at Zivko's were, you know, people were asking me about buying them and stuff like that.
Really?
And I was, you know, magazines like Kerrang really? All the magazines like that. And so I started looking at the work, and I'm going, well, my work is just as good as what these guys are. And I go, you know, these guys there's people getting paid to do exactly what I'm doing.
A lot of money.
So I thought, I'm going to look into this. And so I went, and I started out at Fox Valley Tech, and they had a career planning course that they offered for free. Okay. And that's really where it started. Okay. That's really where as me doing it as, you know, as a professional and trying to do it as a business started. So take us to timeline from when you started taking these pictures for the venue. What kind of shows did you take pictures for? And then how long did you do it for until the thing at Fox Valley, that course? Yeah. I want to say like I said, about 1981 was probably when I did that Instamatic thing at Brown County Arena and went, well, I got to have a better camera than this. So I went and bought a camera. And luckily, I was just lucky enough to run into the person that sold me the camera that I bought. Mm-hmm. And I told them what I was going to do. And so they didn't try to sell me some stuff I didn't need. He actually sold me some decent equipment. And that helped out a lot right away. Somebody sold me the right equipment right away. Yeah. Then, the very first show that I shot with my 35mm camera was Metallica, Wasp, and Armored Saint. And they played at the Carlton West in Green Bay. Oh, my God. Which I believe that the guys from Metallica were probably about 19 at the time.
Oh, holy
And-
shit.
And luckily, I just got lucky because I didn't know what I was doing at this show. This was the first concert I was shooting with this 35 millimeter camera with a little bit of instruction from the camera guy. Went in there, and luckily I got a few good shots.
Okay.
And I was like, wow. I went. It hooked me because I had a memory of the show that wasn't just a story that I told. I was like, I can look at this for a long time and always remember the show.
Yeah.
And so that was the first one, very first one that I shot, and I believe that was 1980.
So, did you have a photo pass for that?
No.
Okay.
There, you didn't need one.
Right. So when you started taking pictures for this venue down near Madison,
Yep.
how long were you taking pictures for them? What kind of bands did you do? And then bring us from that point until the Fox Valley thing.
So I worked for Zivco's for probably about a year.
Okay.
I want to say, somewhere in there. And probably shot, I don't know, quite a few bands. Foghat, Wishbone Ash, Cheap Trick,
Damn.
Quiet Riot, Motorhead.
Jeez.
I wish I could remember them all in that year, but probably 20, 25, decent shows that I did. And during that time then is when I was taking the career planning course.
Oh, so it was
during this, it was
Okay.
right kind of during that.
Gotcha.
So the guy that was running the career planning course, I was bringing him stuff I was doing, and he was like, "Whoa," and he, and I actually, during that time, I think it was when I don't know if they still have an in-house newspaper, but they started one, and I can't remember what it was called. I still have a copy of it because it was the first thing I ever had a photo published in, and I actually did a review of
really?
of a show. Yeah, it was something too because I think I reviewed that. It was Judas Priest. Judas Priest. It was supposed to be Judas Priest, I think Girls' School, and the Rods were supposed to play.
The Rods.
And the Rods didn't show up, which made me extremely mad because that was who I was there to see. And this wasn't something I was photographing. This was just something I was going to.
Yeah.
And they had a brand new band from New Jersey that was filling in for the Rods. They flew in for the show. Bon Jovi. Nobody had ever heard. They were throwing stuff at them. It was like that wasn't the right band for the show.
Yeah.
So in my review, I wrote that in 5 years, these guys would be sweeping the floors of the record company because that's how bad they were. And, oh my God, did I get a valuable lesson of how wrong it could be.
That's incredible.
And what really is incredible about that, as much as I hated him, I just hated him because I was such a metalhead back then.
Yeah.
And couldn't even figure out how great a guitar player Richie was, or how good they really were, even though I didn't like their style of music.
Yeah.
What really good, they were just good. I have to admit. So it was a good lesson. And so that's when I was doing all that. And then he kept seeing my stuff, and he told me, he said, "You got to quit your job and go to college." And I was just like, "Well, I can't do that." And he goes, "Well, you have to do it." And I go, I can't do that. I said, you don't understand. I have things to do in my life, and where am I going to get? He goes, "It doesn't matter." He goes, "You have to do this." He goes, "Look at your work." He goes, "Look at the passion you have for this." He goes, "This is what you have to do." And I was about 25 or 26 at the time, I think.
Okay.
Something like that. And one thing led to another, and Nina Foundry went through a real bad spell, and it was in the mid-'80s, 1986, 87, the economy was just trash.
Yeah.
And I had been there almost 10 years, and I got laid off. And I was like, and then I had been through the career planning course. I had actually started taking some pre-college courses because I didn't graduate from high school, and this guy wanted me to go to college. I couldn't remember how to do fractions, And so
Brutal.
I just started doing that kind of, I'll think about this. And he talked me into taking these classes, and I thought, well, maybe I'll just take a few local photography classes. I got laid off.
Okay.
So that gave me the opportunity. That opened the door right there.
Yeah.
Because the workforce development, they have a retraining programs that you can get into. And they will actually, you can get money for college.
Oh, okay.
You know. And so I found out about that and went, well, and I got very lucky that I had the father that I did, that when I was really scared to tell him that I was thinking about quitting, because I had a good solid job. I was making really, really good money on Neenah Foundry, really good money.
Yeah.
And I was scared to tell my dad that I was going to give this up and maybe go off and do what I was going to do. And I was afraid of what he was going to say. But the way things worked out, he had just lost his job after like 35 years of building a company into something. And once the owner died and his kids took over, they got rid of my dad. And
Jeez.
I asked him about quitting my job and going to college and what he thought. And he told me, he said, listen, he said, you are going to have one chance in your life to live your dreams. And he said, if you get that chance, he said, my advice to people is do it. He goes, Neenah Foundry, he said, 50 years from now, and he was so right about this, he said, you can come back here, and he said, you can walk right back into the job you had. He said, just remember that. And he said, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but my dad was really into golf, and I know that he wishes that instead of going into manufacturing, just going into industry, period, that he had stayed in the golf and been a teacher. He was a great golf teacher, a great golf coach. He could have easily been a college golf coach.
Really?
But his father didn't believe in that being a way to make a living. You know, that wasn't going to work. And so when my dad was young, he was trying to instill that into me, but enough things had happened to him in life that he told me, he said, you have to live your life for yourself. He said, you will never be a happy person unless you actually live life the way, he said, don't be what I want you to be. Don't be what your mom wants you to be. He said, surely don't ever be what a woman or a wife wants you to be. He said, you have to be yourself. He said, if you do that, if you live for yourself, he said, don't be selfish, but live your passions out, your dreams. He said, you will be so happy. And wow, did he nail it. When he told me to do that, because I immediately went home and went, I'm going to go do it. I'm going to, and I had already scoped out some colleges and stuff like that and come up with a somewhat of a formulated plan, and went home and packed up all my stuff and moved to Michigan and went to college.
So you went to NMU?
No, I went to what was called Delta College.
Okay.
It was in Saginaw, Michigan.
Okay.
And I was looking at going to Central Michigan. And I actually took some classes there. But luckily, again, I knew somebody that when I first started looking at colleges, they told me to not focus on the schools, to look for a teacher, especially for what I wanted to do. To find a photography teacher that I felt had what I needed to learn. And I ran into one, Linda Menger, over at Delta College, and wow, it was, I could have never in my life picked a better spot or a better person to teach me what I needed to know.
So you went to this college for 4 years and graduated?
No, I went to 2 years, at Delta College. It was only, at that time, it's a 4-year college now, but it was only a 2-year college then. Okay. And so I got my associate's degree there in journalism and photojournalism. Nice. Then I went down to Kentucky and transferred to Northern Kentucky University, where I continued education. But I never did finish to the bachelor. I ended up going 4 years, but never. There was, came to the end, and the thing for me is by this time, I was working so much I didn't have time for school anymore, and it didn't really matter to me anymore. I had gotten, with my associate's degree, I had everything I needed to go to where I needed to be with the rock and roll photography, and this is something that I always tell people because they don't understand sometimes. I never did it to make money. The thought of going into it to do it to make a lot of money, I mean, when you're young, you want to make a lot of money and be famous and all that. But by this time, I was already starting to get into my 30s, and the money didn't matter anymore. It was luckily for me, it still was always about the music.
That's cool.
It was always about, I just had to be around it. It didn't matter to me how much I made. It didn't matter to me what kind of lifestyle I had, what kind of vehicle I drove. None of that mattered to me. As long as I was working in the rock and roll business and around it as much as I could be, that's what made me happy. And it wasn't easy. And then the money end of it just kind of happened, because I was in the right place at the right time. And I worked hard.
Yeah, a lot of times that's all that matters is busting your ass and then knowing the right people.
You hit it right. It's busting your ass, because I know you can't bust your ass physically more than you can at Nina Foundry. Trust me. And luckily, I always liked that. I always liked physical work. I just like staying in shape, and so that didn't bother me. And I always thought, boy, it'll be weird to get out. But I never worked so hard in my entire life as I did at rock and roll photography. Sometimes I know I worked on a album project for a band called The Toll, which I ended up doing their album cover. They were on Geffen Records. So this was like, at the time that I did this, it was the most important thing that I ever done in my life. And there were some photos that they needed for the CD, for the inner pages of the CD. And they wanted them like within 2 days. And in those days, you had to send them to them, because I had to get in the darkroom and print the pictures. Damn. And I was up for like almost 2 days perfected, because I was so worried about making these pictures perfect. I know one of the shots, I must have printed it 100 times until I had the most perfect photo that I thought, that I could send them. And, I never imagined that I'd work like that at anything.
Yeah. But when you love something, like, I'm doing this studio all the time. You're doing your photography. When you do something like this that you love so much, you just want to do it all the time. It doesn't feel like work. No, I know it's super cliche, but
it's the truth, though.
Yeah.
You work harder than you've ever worked before in your life, but it's not really work.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it.
No, it's not. And now that I'm kind of retired, now I'm. I didn't say this, but I heard somebody say it, and this is so much the truth. I don't know how I ever had time to work. I have so much to do with storytelling and all the things that I do now that I don't know. It's crazy. Mm-hmm. But it's just passions. You got to find passions in life.
Yeah. And if your passion can pay your bills, why not, right?
Yeah. And can it pay your, there's people that it's not just about paying their bills. They want to make millions. And those people, that's fine if that's what you want to do. But that was never what it was for me. And I am so glad that I was never that way, because out of all the rock and roll stories that I have, it's always, people are surprised when they ask me like about some of the greatest times I ever had, and I tell them stories that aren't the crazy drug-fueled, sex-crazed, rock and roll backstage stories. Yeah. It's the little things. It's about the personal things. One of the greatest moments of my life was, like I said, Motorhead was one of the first bands I shot. Well, I shot Motorhead many, many, many times over the years and got to meet Lemmy many, many times over the years. Mm-hmm. So one time I was in Cincinnati, and by this time I had probably met Lemmy like 5 or 6 times, during different interviews and shows and stuff that I had done on Motorhead. And I walked into the club in Cincinnati, and Lemmy was playing pool. And I walked in, and he goes, "Hey!" And he didn't remember my name, but he recognized me. And he goes like, "Dude," he goes, "Wow, you really get around, And I was like, "Well, so do you, And just the fact that he knew who I was like, I was like, that
puts you on cloud nine.
Oh man, who cares about money? Let me know who I was. And I got to play pool with him, and that was the day that he actually told me that he wished he had never wrote the Ace of Spades. Believe it or not. But to his credit, that day he actually had a toothache that I didn't know, because the show that night, I went there for the interview and got all that stuff done. But the show that night got canceled because he had some kind of abscess tooth, and I didn't. But so he was kind of in a growly mood. But But he told me he actually told me that he said there what had happened was there was a meet and greet
Okay.
And this guy came up, the typical Motorhead fan, came up and he was like, got Lemmy's autograph. And Lemmy was really cool about all that stuff. And he was really cool with his fans. He was really cool. And the guy got the autograph and all that stuff, and they shot the shit for a minute, him and 2 or 3 people that he was with, and they were all peeing their pants, and so they turn around to walk away, and the guy goes, he turns around and he goes, Lemmy, and he goes, Ace of Spades, man, and and he walks away, and Lemmy just turns to me and he goes, God, he goes, some days I wish I'd never wrote that song. And if Lemmy's got the Ace of Spades tattooed on his arm. Yeah. The album that it's on is called the Ace of Spades. I was like, I pointed at his arm. I go, well, and he goes, I know. He goes, I know. And I said, Lemmy, that song bought you a lot of cans of beans. And he goes, that's true. But he goes, what makes me mad about it is, he said, I wrote some just great music that it seems like people just don't ever recognize. And he goes, that song, he goes, that's all they ever want to say is the Ace of Spades. And he goes, I can't stand it anymore.
I think about that a lot. Like these bands like Beastie Boys, their song, I don't even know what it's called, but it's the one where it goes, you got to fight for your right to party. Yeah. They fucking hate that song. Yeah. And you got to wonder, like, you might hate it, but it's what made you famous. Yeah. You got to wonder, would they rather have not been known for that song at all and just stayed kind of a mediocre band? Or, and I'm not saying that's the only song they're known for, but I'm just throwing that out as an example.
And I think Lemmy is a perfect example of how to deal with that. He when the popularity of Ace of Spades was at its top, he could have easily went to major labels, signed big record deals, made way, way, way more money than he made, but he never did. He always wanted to help out. I talked to him about it once, and I asked him about, why didn't you sign with Warner Brothers? And he was like, well, he goes, that's not what it was about. And it was people like that along the way that led me down the path of that I was on the right track of not wanting to be the highest paid photographer in the world.
Gotcha.
That's not what that shouldn't be what it's about.
Yeah.
It's almost like the music world is almost all that way now because
I know.
There's the money is so vastly spread out that if you're not doing it for the love of music, you're gonna struggle nowadays. At least it seems to me.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain degree. I mean, I talk to bands about this all the time. I'm like, hey, recording is kind of expensive. If you're going to be a band trying to do this for real, you've got to have some kind of income. So you've got to make some money, but don't stop doing it for the music.
Yeah.
Like you can't write songs that you think are going to be radio hits. Just write a good song, a song that you like. And if you like it, somebody else is probably going to like it too.
Yeah. Yeah. There are people that can strictly write a pop tune and make money at it, but they're not. Most of those people don't have this. They didn't have the same kind of passion that I did for music. Yeah. I don't think.
Probably not.
Probably not because there's so many people that would look at a band like Motorhead and just go, they suck. Lemmy can't sing. He's not a very good looking guy, but you know what? He made a pretty good living doing it, and he had a lot of girls.
Yeah.
So
wasn't he in the Guinness Book of World Records or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
It was just a stupid high number.
Yeah. There's a lot of stories about him that are probably true and not true, but he's, he was an extremely intelligent man, is what most people don't realize about him. He knew how to do it, obviously. Look at Motorhead's music. I mean, it really isn't, it's never going to be radio stuff. It's taken a life of its own because he's such a legend, but he's a legend just because he always did what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
Typical, just like my dad told me, live for yours. Don't be Motorhead for the money. Be Motorhead for Motorhead is what amazing. It was,
That's amazing.
And it really was. And that's the way it was. And I was lucky to be around people but I gravitated towards people like that because those were the people I felt comfortable with, all those kinds of bands. And I love telling those kinds of stories, just the simple little stories.
Yeah. Man, I wish I could make that into a t-shirt. don't be Motorhead for the money. Be Motorhead for Motorhead.
Yeah,
but I can't use their name, obviously. So
well, you can, but you could probably get in some trouble.
yeah, I don't want to get sued.
Yeah.
So you graduate college, and well, you get your associates. What do you do from there? You move down to Kentucky, you said?
Yeah.
So then what do you do there? What kind of gigs do you get? And then also let me know how and when you got your nickname Meatman. And that is where we've got to cut off on this first episode. So thanks again for tuning in. Make sure to drop by next week, Tuesday at 6 a.m. for the next episode. If you or your band is looking for a producer or mix engineer for your next music release, check out sourcetrackstudio.com. I'll have a link in the show notes below. Take a listen to the music on the site. If you like what you hear, send me a message and hopefully we can work together.